The grand ballroom of the Sterling mansion sparkled with 1,000 tiny lights, each crystal on the massive chandelier catching and throwing back the warm glow of expensive candles. The marble floor gleamed like a mirror, reflecting the elegant dresses and polished shoes of New York's wealthiest elite. Among the crowd of laughing adults and clinking champagne glasses, a small figure in a wheelchair moved slowly through the sea of legs and flowing fabric. This was Lily Sterling, just 7 years old, with soft auburn hair that fell in gentle waves around her pale face. Her bright green eyes, once full of life and laughter, now held a sadness that no child should ever carry. She wore a simple white dress with tiny blue flowers, a stark contrast to the elaborate gowns surrounding her. Her small hands gripped the wheels of her chair tightly as she tried to navigate through the crowd that seemed to have forgotten she existed. The accident had happened 2 years ago, on a sunny afternoon that had started with such promise. Lily and her mother, Grace, had been driving to the beach for a special mother-daughter day when a truck ran a red light. Grace didn't survive the impact, and Lily woke up in a hospital bed 3 weeks later, unable to feel anything below her waist. Her father, Alexander Sterling, one of the most successful real estate developers in the country, had been in Tokyo closing a billion-dollar deal when it happened. He flew back immediately, but the damage was done. Not just to Lily's legs, but to the bond between father and daughter. In his grief, Alexander threw himself even deeper into his work, unable to look at Lily without seeing Grace's face and feeling the crushing weight of guilt for not being there when they needed him most. 6 months after the accident, Alexander married Victoria Blackwood, a stunning woman with raven black hair and eyes like ice. Victoria came from old money and knew how to work a room, how to make powerful men fall at her feet with just a smile. She had been circling Alexander for years, waiting for her opportunity, and when Grace died, she moved in quickly, offering comfort and companionship to the grieving widower. To the outside world, Victoria was the perfect stepmother, always photographed at charity events for disabled children, always speaking eloquently about the importance of family. Behind closed doors, when Alexander was away on his endless business trips, Victoria showed her true face. She saw Lily not as a child who needed love and care, but as an obstacle, a reminder of the first wife, a burden that prevented her from having Alexander's full attention and, more importantly, his full inheritance should anything happen to him. Tonight was Victoria's 40th birthday party, and she had invited everyone who mattered in New York society. Senators, celebrities, CEOs, and even a few foreign diplomats filled the ballroom, all eager to curry favor with the powerful Victoria Sterling. Standing near the grand piano, Victoria's sister, Cassandra, watched the crowd with calculating eyes. Cassandra was younger than Victoria, but equally ambitious, married to a Wall Street banker named Marcus, who spent most of his time making crude jokes and drinking too much. They were Victoria's allies in the house, always ready to support her version of events, always ready to confirm that poor little Lily was difficult, ungrateful, and impossible to manage. The three of them had created a narrative that Alexander had slowly begun to believe that Lily was troubled, that she made up stories for attention, that she was becoming a problem child who needed strict discipline. Lily wheeled herself toward the buffet table, her stomach growling softly. She had been sent to her room without dinner as punishment for accidentally knocking over a vase that morning, though Victoria had actually bumped into her chair on purpose, causing the accident. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread made her mouth water, and she reached up toward the table, trying to get a small roll. But the table was too high, designed for standing adults, and her fingers could barely brush the edge of the white tablecloth. She tried to stretch further, her small body straining with effort, when suddenly her wheelchair tilted. The front wheels came off the ground for a terrifying second before crashing back down. but not before her hand had knocked into a large crystal bowl filled with steaming hot pumpkin soup. The bowl teetered on the edge of the table, and time seemed to slow down as Lily watched it tip toward her. She tried to move backward, but her chair was wedged between the table and a marble column. The scalding soup poured over her head and shoulders like liquid fire, soaking through her thin dress and burning her delicate skin. A scream tore from her throat, high and desperate, cutting through the music and conversation like a knife. "Please, Mom, it's too hot," she cried out, the words coming instinctively, even though her mother had been gone for 2 years. The pain was unbearable, and tears streamed down her face, mixing with the soup that dripped from her hair. Her small hands tried to wipe away the burning liquid, but it only spread the pain further. The entire ballroom fell silent for a moment, every eye turning toward the child in the wheelchair. Victoria appeared almost instantly, her designer heels clicking against the marble as she approached. To the crowd, her face showed concern, but Lily saw the flash of anger in her eyes, the tightening of her jaw that meant punishment would come. "Later, oh darling," Victoria said loudly enough for everyone to hear, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You really must be more careful. Look at the mess you've made." She grabbed a napkin and began roughly wiping at Lily's face, pressing hard enough to hurt, her long nails occasionally scratching the burned skin. "This is what happens when children don't listen and try to take things without asking," she added. Playing to her audience, Cassandra appeared at her sister's side, shaking her head with theatrical disappointment. "Poor Victoria," she said to the nearby guests. "She tries so hard with the girl, but ever since the accident, Lily has been so difficult. Acting out, telling stories, always wanting attention." Marcus laughed from behind them, already 3 drinks in, and louder than necessary. "Maybe she needs a special school," he suggested with a nasty smile. "Somewhere they know how to handle problem children. It would give Victoria some peace." The crowd murmured sympathetically, some nodding in agreement. After all, Victoria Sterling was one of them, a pillar of society. Surely she knew best how to handle her troubled stepdaughter. Lily's sobs grew quieter as the pain from the soup began to fade into a dull throb. But the pain in her heart grew sharper. She looked around at all the adults, searching for one kind face, one person who might see what was really happening. But they had all turned away, returning to their conversations, dismissing her as Victoria's burden to bear. Her small hands gripped the wheels of her chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She wanted to scream the truth, to tell them all how Victoria treated her when no one was watching. About the hours locked in her room, about the meals she was denied, about the cruel words that cut deeper than any physical pain. But who would believe a 7-year-old girl over the gracious, charitable Victoria Sterling? Just as Victoria was about to wheel Lily away from the party, presumably to lock her in her room for the rest of the night, the massive front doors of the ballroom burst open with such force that they slammed against the walls. Every head turned toward the entrance, where a tall figure stood silhouetted against the bright lights of the foyer. Alexander Sterling stepped into his home, still wearing his traveling suit, a small wrapped gift in his hand. He had cut his London trip short, flying through the night to surprise his wife for her birthday. But the surprise on his face as he took in the scene before him was nothing compared to the shock that rippled through the room. His eyes found Lily immediately, taking in her soup-soaked hair, her tear-stained face, the red marks on her skin where the hot liquid had burned her. The gift box slipped from Alexander's fingers, hitting the marble floor with a soft thud. His face went through a series of transformations, shock, confusion, and then, as understanding dawned, a rage so powerful that several guests took involuntary new steps backward. "What is this?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet, more terrifying than any shout could have been. He moved toward Lily with quick strides, dropping to his knees beside her wheelchair, his hands gentle as they touched her face. Checking the burns. "Baby, what happened? Who did this to you?" His voice broke on the last word, and Lily saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in 2 years. Her father. Really seeing her, really present for the first time since the accident. "It was an accident," Victoria said quickly, her voice still, maintaining that false sweetness, though there was an edge of panic now. Poor Lily knocked over the soup bowl. "I was just cleaning her up. You know how clumsy she's been lately." She reached for Lily's chair, but Alexander's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with enough force to make her gasp. "Don't touch her," he said, and his voice carried a warning that made even the boldest guests shift uncomfortably. "Lily," he said, turning back to his daughter, his voice gentle again. "Tell me the truth, all of it." And in that moment, with her father's eyes locked on hers, really seeing her for the first time in so long, Lily found her voice. The words came pouring out like water breaking through a dam. 2 years of pain and fear and loneliness spilling into the silent ballroom. She told him about the locked doors, about the missed meals, about the cruel words and crueler punishments. She told him about the bruises hidden beneath long sleeves, about the nights she cried herself to sleep calling for her mother, about how Victoria had told her that her father didn't love her anymore, that he wished she had died in the accident instead of her mother. As she spoke, Alexander's face grew paler and paler, his hands shaking as they held hers. The crowd of guests stood frozen, unable to look away from the devastating scene unfolding before them. "She's lying," Victoria shrieked, her composed mask finally cracking completely. "The child is disturbed. She makes up these horrible stories for attention. Ask anyone. Ask Cassandra. Ask Marcus. They'll tell you the truth." But Alexander wasn't listening to her anymore. He stood slowly, lifting Lily into his arms with infinite care, cradling her against his chest the way he used to when she was a baby. "The truth," he said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom, "is that I failed my daughter. I left her in the care of a monster because I was too wrapped up in my own grief to see what was right in front of me." He looked at Victoria, and the contempt in his eyes made her take a step back. "The truth is that my wife is a child abuser, and everyone in this room who saw the signs and said nothing is complicit." The sound of police sirens grew louder outside, and Victoria's face went white. "You called the police," she gasped. Alexander shook his head. "I didn't have to. My security team has been documenting everything for the past 3 months, ever since I started suspecting something was wrong. Every locked door, every missed meal, every bruise. They have video, audio, everything. I just needed to hear it from Lily herself to be sure." He looked around the room at the stunned faces of New York's elite. "And all of you who stood by and watched a child suffer, who chose to believe the word of an adult over the pain of a 7-year-old girl, you're all witnesses now. When this goes to trial, and it will go to trial, I'll make sure each and every one of you is called to testify about what you saw tonight." The police entered the ballroom, their presence turning the elegant party into a crime scene. Victoria tried to run, but her designer heels betrayed her on the polished marble, and she stumbled. Cassandra and Marcus tried to slip out through the side door, but more officers were waiting there. As the handcuffs clicked around Victoria's wrists, she turned to look at Alexander one more time. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "I'll take everything from you. Everyone will know what kind of man you really are, neglecting your daughter, choosing work over family." Alexander didn't even dignify her with a response. He was too busy whispering to Lily, telling her she was safe now, that he was sorry, so very sorry, and that things were going to be different from now on. The next morning, the Sterling mansion was quiet, except for the sound of birds singing in the garden. Alexander sat beside Lily's bed, where she had finally fallen asleep after a long visit from the doctor who had treated her. Burns and documented her injuries for the police report. He had not left her side all night, holding her hand even in sleep, afraid that if he let go, he might lose her again. When she finally stirred, her green eyes fluttering open, the first thing she saw was her father's face, tired and worn but present in a way it hadn't been for so long. "Daddy," she whispered, as if afraid he might disappear. "I'm here, baby," he said, squeezing her hand gently. "And I'm not going anywhere. We have a lot to talk about, a lot to work through, but we're going to do it together." The trial was swift and decisive. The evidence was overwhelming, and several party guests, shaken by what they had witnessed, came forward to testify about other incidents they had seen but ignored. Victoria was sentenced to 15 years in prison for child abuse, with Cassandra and Marcus receiving lesser sentences as accomplices. The media had a field day with the story, but Alexander shielded Lily from most of it, focusing instead on her recovery. He hired the best therapists, both physical and emotional, to help her heal from her trauma. He cut back his work schedule dramatically, making sure he was home for dinner every night, reading her bedtime stories, and being the father he should have been all along. Slowly, painfully, they rebuilt their relationship. There were setbacks and hard days when the memories were too strong, when Lily would wake up crying from nightmares, when Alexander would be overwhelmed by guilt for failing to protect her. But there were good days, too, more and more of them as time went on. Days when Lily would laugh at her father's terrible jokes, when they would work together on her physical therapy exercises, when they would sit in the garden and talk about Grace, keeping her memory alive in healthier ways. Alexander had a special ramp installed in every room of the house, making sure Lily could go anywhere she wanted. He enrolled her in art therapy, where she discovered a talent for painting, expressing her emotions through colors and shapes when words weren't enough. 6 months after the trial, Alexander took Lily to the beach, the same one she had been trying to reach with her mother on that fateful day. They sat on a blanket, watching the waves roll in. And Lily finally told him the whole story of the accident, details she had been too traumatized to share before. She told him how her mother had seen the truck coming and had thrown herself over Lily, protecting her with her own body in those final seconds. "She saved me, Daddy," Lily said, tears streaming down her face. "She gave her life so I could live mine." Alexander pulled her close, his own tears falling freely. "Then we need to make sure we live lives that honor her sacrifice," he said. "Both of us, together." They started a foundation in Grace's name, dedicated to protecting children from abuse and providing support for disabled children who had lost parents. Lily became the youngest spokesperson for the foundation, bravely sharing her story to help other children find their voices. Alexander used his wealth and influence to push for stronger laws protecting vulnerable children and mandatory reporting requirements for suspected abuse. The Sterling Mansion, once a place of pain and fear, became a haven for healing, hosting support groups and therapy sessions for other families dealing with similar traumas. On the first anniversary of Victoria's arrest, Alexander and Lily stood in the ballroom where it had all come to light. The room had been transformed, the cold marble covered with soft rugs, the formal furniture replaced with comfortable couches and play areas for children. "Do you remember what I said that night?" Alexander asked, looking down at his daughter. Lily nodded, a small smile on her face. "You said the truth is that I failed my daughter. But you didn't fail me, Daddy. You saved me. You came back when I needed you most." Alexander knelt beside her wheelchair, taking both her hands in his. "I promise you, Lily, I will never fail you again. Every day for the rest of my life, I will be here, making sure you know how loved you are, how valuable you are, how strong you are." As the sun set through the tall windows, painting the room in warm golden light, Lily thought about how different everything was now. The pain was still there, might always be there in some form, but it no longer defined her. She had her father. Back. Really and truly back. She had a voice that people listened to. She had a purpose in helping other children. And most importantly, she had hope. The little girl who had cried and begged, "Please, Mom, it's too hot," had found her strength in the midst of her pain, had found her protector when she needed him most, and had learned that sometimes the darkest moments can lead to the brightest transformations. The millionaire who had rushed in that night hadn't just said words. He had changed everything with his actions, proving that love, when finally awakened, can overcome even the deepest failures and the most terrible betrayals. The story of Lily. Sterling became more than just a scandal in high society. It became a rallying cry for child protection, a reminder that wealth and status mean nothing if we fail to protect the most vulnerable among us. And in a quiet moment each night before she went to sleep, Lily would whisper to the photo of her mother on her nightstand, "I'm okay now, Mama. Daddy and I are taking care of each other, and we're making sure no other child goes through what I did. Thank you for saving me so I could save others." The title of her story, "Little Girl Cried and Begged, Please, Mom, It's Too Hot." Suddenly, Millionaire rushed in and said, ... became not just a headline, but a turning point. A moment when truth triumphed over lies, when love conquered fear, and when a father and daughter found their way back to each other through the darkness.